actually what I wanted to talk about. Probably my presentation will be a bit unusual. I would like to talk about the performance of the equipment, including how it affects the clinic, what factors influence productivity. Basically, there is a fairly simple formula that can be used to calculate the hourly productivity of any machine. Dad can adjust the working speed, and it might compensate for about one dessert, 1 for 10. Among these measurements of capture meters now result in a dictator per hour. But if we take a potato planter, which is nice, with a row spacing of 75 centimeters, it can plant during 1 hour of effective working time. The working speed, the maximum working speed, is 7 km/h. Why is the maximum speed for planters 7 km/h? What we mean by speed is that we exclude what's called rolling. When the tuber falls into one furrow at a higher speed due to inertia, it starts to roll. Moreover, depending on the shape of the tuber and the surface it falls onto, this rolling can vary. And even if we very accurately throw the tubers to the bottom of the furrow with a spoon planter, due to rolling, we get a completely uneven distribution. The length of the run, it's the same as we have. The maximum speed is 6 to 7 km/h. Next comes the control. We took, what's maximum speed? Taking account shift time. We theoretically get this planter can cover vast areas. However, this is impractical. Seed material, fertilizers, plant liquids will cling to an endless year. It is capable of suppressing a hectare in an 8-hour shift. But that's unrealistic, because there's a little thing called the important shift utilization coefficient. T small, tau, also sometimes it's called what it depends on. There are several indicators, but the main indicator is the time for implementing profitable technologies over a 3-year period. This is the time allocated for turns. This is the time for servicing the equipment during the work of the personal immune mechanizer. And as for cleaning equipment, it is a process of containing impurities in the volume of the well. This is very, very relevant for potatoes. For the potato planter, the shift time utilization rate ranges from 2. This is the maximum. The most interesting thing is that as the speed increases, the shift utilization coefficient decreases. Yes, the productivity is somewhat higher, but the shift utilization coefficient is significantly higher. Now, if we take the work at maximum speed, if we take the maximum possible shift utilization coefficient, we have the productivity of the potato planter. G for 1 hour work shift. Well, reality shows that on average per day, a potato planter in a 10-12 hour work shift, it plants between 10 and a maximum of 15 hectares per hour. Nice. So, when the suckers were shaded, they were shaded. In that case, let's take a look at the completely sleepy process. At what point can we have it once a season? Here, 2 more factors come into play. 1% is technical readiness, that is, how much time. The working planter is in good condition. At the end of technical readiness, even a new machine cannot be equal to 0. And the older the machine, the less and less it is in good condition at the end of its technical readiness. Another very serious factor that significantly affects overall performance is the weather. I specifically downloaded information from the RP5 website. Weather archive for May for the years 22, 23, and 24. As you can see, there were 7 days in May 2022 when the precipitation was more than in the last 3 years. Actually, there was planting, but with what? Well, they were small. Next. The soil temperature is not small, below 5 degrees. In 20 days, 6 days, in May 2022, the soil temperature was below zero. For 27 days, the surface of the soil was wet. So the conditions for planting when it was relatively possible to plant were only 12 days. And on all the other days, planting was either impossible or completely impractical. Because everyone knows very well that planting wet soil leads to the formation of clumps. And it has already happened that clumps formed during the soil preparation and planting period. No irrigation, no rain will wash it away. The soil relaxation period is fruitful, in most cases exceeding the meditation period of cats. And that clump that we drag into the combine is not the same clump that we say, this is my soil, and so on. Yes, the soil can clump up and all of this will dry out. But if the soil reaches its normal density, even a little moisture allows that clump to break apart. That clump that we drag into the bunker, this clump formed in them is a dead dream. It turned out that the percentage of calm conditions in May 2022 was a little better in 2023 and a little better in 2024. But again, the 24th is really stretched. Why? Because more or less decent weather conditions for planting were at the beginning of May, and then late frosts started at the end of May. I just pulled that out of thin air. Really, there was this circus of weather conditions, probably in the tens. Son, are you ready to take off your head? That season it was so noisy with the machines. The average drive maximum speed up to maximum. We used shifts on one port sheet and buying up to the manifested master 111. Really, to properly plant potatoes with a sad planter, it's unlikely that 100 guitars can come, maybe even 70. And when they say, I have a planter and I use it to plant, 200, 250, sure, you can wave around 200 pieces, even in a hat with one skin. High performance. Let's consider the conditions that the planting area is 100 megatat, cm. Kilometer for a large catch. Certain rates of application of fertilizers with ADR, certain loading time, working speed, inflation time, censorship. With a row spacing of 75 centimeters, the productivity is measured in megatons. So per shift, at 8 o'clock. But if the spacing is between 5 and 90 centimeters, then productivity increases. Thank you. In reality, something can adequately increase by 20%, but due to other factors, productivity will be around 14-15% throughout the day. This is one of the advantages that we desire in the new world. In general, I always say that the historical row spacing of 90 centimeters didn't come about just because some rats were taken away, but because more powerful tractors started being used for potatoes. If 30 years ago potato tractors were rated at up to 110 horsepower, they easily operated on narrow tires with a width of 180 millimeters. When they started using more powerful ones on potatoes, that's how it was. This one was still applied. They started using a width of 270 millimeters, and we see that with a width of 270 millimeters, the care is taken. Ukraine is moving away from ceramics, and when harvesting, it seriously damages the cells, including the tubers that are in the soil. That's why they increased it. In order to, such spikes could easily be handled by tractors with 150 horsepower or more, including on dual wheels. Well, then the benefits came: increased productivity, increased large lands and around them. Accordingly, old lands, and so on and so forth. But the main indicator is this one. It's not always good to have spacing between 5 and 90 centimeters. They have two regions, but this doesn't concern us, solid regions. Between 5 and 90 centimeters, it all played out better. We had a project in the Krasnodar region, right near the city of Anapa. They decided to work between 5 and 90 centimeters, but they talked about all the problems that could arise. They said, "Don't teach us how to live." As a rule, the investor said, "This is the most modern technology." They never got a harvest from us. One day we arrived in the field. The ridge, magnificent. They had everything on stone. The ridge, magnificent, soft underneath, soft underneath. We just didn't form the ridge. We were running around with our hands. And in each chair, there were 2 to 3 potatoes the size of a chicken egg, because there wasn't enough time to get to the yard, and it just overheated. It's just a specific case. Generally, everything is now noticeable in our region. This is one of the ways to increase productivity. Pretty good. Klinogona. That's an interesting thing, too. Here, I drew such a graph. How does Longue affect the productivity of the aggregates? With a 100-meter gig, even with a very short turnaround time, we get somewhere around. With a kilometer gain, they are significantly higher from the aggregates. What am I getting at? I often see fields. It's incorrect in the norm, but there's still some kind of tail left, which can be the size of a hectare, 1.5 or 2 hectares. And people are savoring these tails. It takes time during planting per hectare, but how much time for harvesting? Sometimes that hectare takes the whole day to harvest because of the turnaround. Plus, there's also the turnaround, right? Again, you can often see a field. There's a limited forest strip on both sides. Turnaround. Any planting aggregate is made to the end of the field. And it's not just that the aggregate turns around. It turns around and does it several times there. It moves in reverse and it's linear. Then the harvesting begins. So it turns out that we have, the combine is just, well, equipment. The harvester is done. The tractor is getting ready for planting, but the combine hasn't collected everything yet, because the turning area is very, very short. So when it comes to the turning area, it's probably not worth being greedy. For normal cleaning, for a combine, especially with a towed harvester, the turning area should probably be at least 15 meters. That's probably the minimum that allows for a smooth turn and a calm operation. As you can see, the temporarily turning gel affects the performance of the equipment. Fertilizer application norms. Well, that's understandable, yes, because there are a lot of gas stations, and accordingly we get than. The lower the application norms, the more you actually have. This happens during a 10-minute loading. But logistics is a very important moment when all technological volumes with continuation percentages are filled up quite quickly. Here you can soak the farm that does this, and between other farms, when potato harvesters prepare their loads in advance so loaders are used. The loader is filled with the entire required volume for the bunker. Using this principle, right away, the volume is transferred and the potatoes are planted. Some people say, well, we work with principles, with the house, the conveyor. Still, a significant amount of time is spent on loading, and in Babel's too. In one farm, we achieved a potato loading time of about 25,000. And I didn't plant a penny of ham. Weather conditions. Accordingly, the change is only in the center of the length. In many cases, in many farms, they really indulge in this, for example, in Bryansk. They plant without mineral fertilizers, without applying mineral fertilizers, and without applying pest control agents. So that the planter is only focused on planting. They are doing some cutting on the tables. The general reports it a little differently. But I guess I'll say this. All agricultural stores are not designed by the end of the road, not by engineers. All agricultural machines are designed by agronomists. They tell the engineers, I want a machine that does this, that, and that. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's how it really is. As for the application of mineral fertilizers, yes. Well, let's think about it this way. If only the Grimov engineers had just taken it upon themselves to say, we're going to apply mineral fertilizers through the planter, through two coulters, which will apply fertilizers to the right and left, and a little below the mother plant. We decided that the program says we don't need this. That doesn't happen. The program said we want the fertilizer to be laid in this zone. Only then will they be used as efficiently as possible. Applying fertilizers by broadcasting them over the surface, yes, this is often seen, especially with the main fertilizers, which are applied after planting, and then we cover them up. With ridge makers, passive or active ridge makers, it doesn't matter, right? So what do we end up with? Some of the fertilizer ends up in the body of the ridge above. The mother fruit above the seed fruit. What do you think? How does the system take it from there? Yes, the gold will take, although those substances that do not walk in the soil, not in the plug-in, they just won't get there. Next year, for the following crop, but the potatoes will remain on them. Well, actually, so it turns out that if you don't apply mineral fertilizers, if you don't treat them, only the seeds produced after the harvest. You can ease up for 10 days. Well, just a few slides. As per global international regulations, hectares change in the area of when increasing the row spacing to 90 centimeters, our productivity increases by up to 12%. Productivity becomes even higher when using the technology. That is, when two rows are dug by the digger, they are placed in the row spacing between the cells and immediately collected in a cover. There are downsides. If the carbon monoxide is within the framework of an unheated coderol, those tubers that fall under the planter, they pass through the separating working element twice. Especially if we have a clump in the shelf between the edges, it can be very unexpected. yield any more on yield. Here is amount of impurities. As you can see, with 0 impurities, the dual row combine has a yield of hectares. But if there are 50% impurities, then we only have 20 hectares. We remove and transport them as soon as we use them. Because one of the main factors that affects the combine's productivity is nothing other than unloading time. And indeed, the more impurities we have, the less potatoes we dig. One of the solutions is using on-the-go unloading. These are either elevator combines or combines in the geraniums that are capable of, well, something like that with. So we probably have some ingredients. But logistics are very important here. There should be a sufficient number of vehicles here that will, first of all, they need to be able to move across the field, especially when it's muddy, and they should be able to move at the speed at which the harvesters are working. Basically, that's all I have. As for the availability of equipment in Agropril today, a free seller in Perednevnik, this is the potato planter Krius. Why Krius? Starting this year, the Rima factory has stopped producing the GL34T potato planter. It has been replaced by a machine called Krius 402. 8-row and 6-row machines of the GL series are available, just like the 3rd and 4th ones. All machines from the GL series are also available, mounted, 40, 40, 20th, exam, and so on and so forth. Another new item for the KS75-4 remover. And in general, all the removers of the KS series have not been discontinued. They have been replaced by tops. Well, that's about the price. A slight increase, but there's practically none for the 4-row. A slightly different layout, more convenient. Everything is still the same. As for the Prius, the machine, it's quite radically different from the GL series. The planting machine is the same, however. They changed the hopper. To provide satisfaction, they changed the geometry of the frame. The so-called swan trellis became available. Someone heard, someone saw, she allows to create a planting unit with any tillage machine. If before Grimme had an option where you could hang it on the back, some tillage unit, but they had a limited number of them. These were Lincoln, Kuhn, Amazon, and the Grimme GRF harvester. Today, you can even hang a 3-meter cultivator, as long as it's not too long. With a passive working element, because there's a hitch, it's attached to the tractor, a tillage unit is hung on the hitch, and then the planter rests on this hitch. This hitch. Such a machine is available to us. It will be ready around the end of April, if anyone is interested. For God's sake, we are ready to offer a very good discount on it because we specifically proved for early order and promotional order. We also have a backpack in the bedroom. F4. Stacking Votovoditel KS75. Here it is. According to the Ognos copier, that's all. Harvesters. Maybe there are 3 left. 3 harvesters, 2 SE260, and 1 SE260, because they are in Germany at a competitive price. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.